In this video, we're going to take a look at a turquoise ink from Montblanc Blue Hour. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, it really does help me out if you check out the entire video. Also, down in the description is a link to the turquoise playlist, so if you wanted to see more of them, you can. I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. Let's take a look at the first writing sample, 90 GSM Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, it does shade. If you look at Montblanc, starts much darker and works its way lighter all the way through, and Hour is in general a darker tone than the Montblanc itself. Extra fine is darker than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 8 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shading, 13 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine shows no color variation. We're really not getting it. The medium shows some, but we're really not seeing it there. And the smear test, I don't know that you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. To have a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are done with a Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a medium, and a Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then a Viscosity Van Gogh with a medium nib was inked up, used for a day, and used to take the notes for this video. The next writing sample is done on 52 GSM Tomoe River. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is just a tad darker than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen or shade and 11 seconds to dry. Medium is a little bit darker than the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 21 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation. We didn't expect it. We didn't get it. You know what we also don't get? The ability to recover if we smear while we're writing. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. A line of ink is put down and then it's put in the water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see this very light blue at the bottom pushing its way up. And this green, which I don't believe to be a green, I really believe it to be a yellow that's being mixed with this very bright blue at the top. But I could be wrong there. The one on the right is allowed to dry for 10 minutes before it's dunked into water. Now, the light blue line on the bottom is really starting to bond with the paper. It's starting to really get there, giving the idea there might be a little bit of resistance. I'd be surprised. That light blue pushes up. We see that green again. Now, I said I think this is a yellow and blue mixing, and that's because of how this green or where this green's really appearing, and we see spotting of yellow through it before the bright blue at the top. I don't think this is two blues and a green. I think this is two blues and a yellow making this ink. The next writing sample is done on 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is just a tad lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 7 seconds to dry. Medium is a little bit darker than the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 11 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both do show a tiny bit of color variation left to right, but we're not getting it in the writing. And the smear test, I don't think you could recover if you smeared it while you were writing. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. The smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it handles itself incredibly well here. It really doesn't have any kind of blowout. It doesn't have much of a spread that occurs. It would feel safe to use in a note-taking situation if you needed to go back and highlight. Now, water's lifting a whole bunch of these tones, but leaving this very minty color of minty green behind, which I wasn't really expecting that to be what's left. It really only took water to get it out of my pen. I expected it to do more on the paper. Pen flush does more than water does. You do have spots where you start to see some of the white of the paper coming through. So in the odd event that water didn't get it out of your pen, you know that pen flush will. The 1/3 bleach solution is completely removing it from the paper. You're not going to need it to get it out of your pen. The next writing sample is done on yellow Rhodia paper. Now this isn't done to see performance changes, much more tone changes, and I was very surprised. I was really expecting the yellow paper to change this ink in some way, but what we see is this is a very opaque color because it is not going through any kind of color change in its darkest or in its lightest tones on the paper, and even when you look at the smear only looks a little bit more green than this turquoise that we got on the white. It's really only in the smear we're seeing the difference, not in any of the writing. I'm impressed. Not that I would expect this is an ink you would use on yellow paper in a professional environment, but it's nice to see what happens sometimes. For the inks tested, the average viscosity is 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Montblanc's Blue Hour has a viscosity of 3.05, making this a pretty darn dry ink. If you're interested in how the viscosity is done and all of that stuff, there's a link to that video down in the description. Let's take a look at Leuchtturm 1917 paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is a little bit lighter than the stub, or a little bit darker than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 6 seconds to dry. Medium is darker than all of the tones on the page, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 9 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both don't really show much color variation, although the extra fine shows a tiny bit left to right. We don't get it in the writing. And the smear test, you could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average dry time was 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Montblanc's Blue Hour has an average dry time of 8 seconds, making this a pretty fast drying ink. The last writing sample is done on 28-pound premium copy paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. The medium has tiny feathering, but not something that's really so distracting for most people. In the Blanc part of Montblanc, you see the feathering much more, and in Hour you see it much more, but not as much. Well, actually, that's tiny feathering all in blue. Tiny feathering, not horrible. No spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. The extra fine is a little lighter than the medium, with no feathering here. No spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 1 second. 1 second to dry. Pretty good performance here. The scrubby shows a tiny bit of color variation left to right. We're not getting it. And the smear test, you could definitely recover it because you can't smear it. Instead of finding inks that look like Montblanc's Blue Hour, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I went with a nice magenta from Monteverde, their Napa Burgundy. Now, if you'd prefer a different complement color, then down in the description are links to those playlists. So what do I think of Montblanc's Blue Hour? The coolest thing about this ink is the color change as it dries. It goes from a nice blue to the turquoise you see on the page. It's very cool. I will overlook anything about this for that cool effect. And just for that, I would like to get a bottle of this. So what nib and pen will give the best writing experience with this ink? It performs well enough, it's well behaved, it shades, well enough. I think a medium flow fine or medium nib really put down the nicest tone. But anything that it might lack, that color changing while it dries just makes it stand out as so cool. I hope you got something out of this video, and in the next video, we're going to look at a shimmering ink from Diamine, Blue Flame.